Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very exciting presentation that we have on invasion biology. I am Lisa Levinson, the campaigns director for In Defense of Animals, and we're here with our Fireside Chat, which is our monthly program where we get to hear a bit from you and share a little about what goes on here at IDA behind the scenes. So we've got our Thule elk campaigner, who is a consultant with IDA, and he also runs Tree Spirit Project. And he is going to share some of his views about invasion biology with us, and then we'll have an exciting discussion. Hi, Jack.
Yeah, don't say that in an airport. Hi, Lisa. I'm sorry, that's my third grade joke, and I just can't break the habit. Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming on a weird Monday in strange and turbulent times. I'm really excited about this, and I'm it's funny to say this, but I'm actually relieved it's a smaller audience. So you guys are going to be the what is it called? The when you put the dummies in a car that drives into a brick wall at 100 miles an hour? That's you guys. Yeah, so thank you, Bob, for not turning on your microphone and screaming. I appreciate that. I saw that reaction. What's kind of cool with a smaller group is I can actually see some faces. And I just gave a public talk for the first time in a while, and I still prefer, actually, because I'm old, meaning over 20, dealing with a live audience where you can see people and see who's engaged. And especially with this topic of invasion biology, I can only see oh gosh, a bunch of people just are listening in. But normally I would ask, do people even know what that term means? And I'm assuming most of you do, or you wouldn't be here. And if you do have your video on, raise your hand if you know what invasion biology is as a topic, which of course I'll go into. I see 2 hands, 3 hands, 4, 5. Okay. Most kind of sort of do. And I'm guessing I'm kind of playing to a home crowd here, which is within defensive animals, people who don't want to see animal slaughters, known as restorations. And I just get so worked up about this topic, so you'll hear me all excited, Jack, with a lot of adrenaline. Part of that is because I've got 50 slides in less than 60 minutes, so that doesn't work. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. Like I say, you guys are the test drive on this. But I have conservation biologists and biologist friends who walk with me through a forest and say, oh, look at that Cape ivy. That shouldn't be there. And I'll start with that as my way to go in. So I'm going to share my screen now and then tell you more. Again, thanks for coming. I am, as Lisa said, Jack Gescheit. I have my Tree Spirit Project, where I first got involved in this topic of invasion biology by getting involved with an effort to either destroy or save, depending on which side of that fence you're on, eucalyptus trees in the East Bay, San Francisco, Oakland Hills. I lived in San Francisco and now Marin County. And that's where I cut my teeth in this topic and read a bunch of books, which I'm going to show to you as well. And yeah, without further ado, as they say, let's see if you can see my screen now. I'm assuming you can.
We can.
Okay, and invasion biology. So,
and this one, we're seeing the ones on the side, the little images on the side. So
okay, you said there was a way to get that. Thank you, Lisa. Sorry, technical stuff here. I think if I hit play, and then that's probably as good as we're going to get here.
That's good. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Ready to advance indicator. Maybe I don't need that. Yeah, I don't need that either. Okay. Okay, thanks, guys. Well, we work the technical. Okay, so I'm sure I'll offend a couple people, but probably not too many of you, because this is not a typical audience. So I was going to write, give me that old time religion, and realized, no, don't show that. That'll be recorded. Don't even say it, Jack. Behave yourself. And if you remember, just 2 words from this, and this is a tribute to David Theodoropoulos, who wrote a wonderful book called, from 21 years ago, I think, Invasion Biology, Critique of a Pseudoscience. And he started his talk by a similar thing, so I'm poaching from him, but giving him credit, so it's not complete plagiarism. If you remember just 2 words from my talk today, these are the 2 words: Roundup and rat poison. And I know that's 4 words. That's what this talk is going to end up centering around, oddly enough. So he also said this, I tailored it a little bit, but 50 years ago, the greatest threats to nature were chainsaws, bulldozers, and poisons. Today, the greatest threats are considered wild plants and animals labeled non-native, alien, and invasive. How do we fight them? With chainsaws, bulldozers, and poisons. Whom does this serve? So that again is thanks to David. I can't give him enough credit. I watched a talk he gave over a decade ago in Berkeley, and during his little presentation, the light bulb in my head went off, and it was that was the revelation, the thunderbolt of truth, piercing the veil. So from his book, I'm just going to read a couple slides, and then I'll get into more fun pictures. The theory of harmful aliens invasions has become a pillar of modern conservation biology. Anthropogenically human dispersed species are categorized as aliens, exotic, or non-native, and are considered in all cases harmful to the recipient ecosystem, the new ecosystem, and are explicitly devalued on this basis alone. Explicit in this theory are the ideas that stable, quote unquote, natural species assemblages are invaded by organisms, that's my misspelling there, sorry, that don't belong there, that species are either native or alien, that invasion is always harmful, and that all, gosh, spelling all over the place, mistake, sorry guys, anthropogenic dispersal is wrong, harmful, and unnatural. And typically I'd look up and see if there's any questions in the audience, but I'll just keep plowing ahead here because, you know, Zoom. So this is a map I grabbed from the Times, the Nature Conservancy. It was an article in the Times. The map is from the Nature Conservancy, and it's showing the effects of the climate change, where animals are on the move, plants are on the move, species are on the move. And I just throw this up as one quick little graphic in my short time here, which is going to whip by, because we only have an hour. I've done this talk for 2.5 hours at times years ago. Species are always on the move. Lots of factors, and more so than ever, it is due to a warming climate, a generally warming climate, of course. So we're going to get into that factor of species are naturally on the move always. Systems are dynamic, not static, and locked in place. And if anything new comes in, that's bad. Something can come in, a species, plant or animal, can do harm in a new environment, but it's not the broad stroke of, as I was reading from that quote, something new is alien and therefore invasive and therefore harmful. These are my Bibles. If you're interested, I'm going to put this up at the end again, but this is where I really cut my teeth and read these books and have highlighted them, put post-it notes. Top left, Beyond the War on Invasive Species, Dow Orion. I'm going to have a couple quotes from her, permaculturalist in Oregon. And she turned me on to kind of what's driving this in our economy. Why have we all of a sudden, 20 years ago, people weren't talking about this, certainly not labeling them invasives, and they're doing so much harm. The New Wild, the second book over, love his provocative subtitle, Why Invasive Species Will Be Nature's Salvation. That's quite a different take from what we hear in the media. And he's an environmental writer, not a scientist per se, but a very thorough researcher. And his book is annotated up the kudzu. Whitewash is more about the, as you can tell, the story of a weed killer, cancer, and the corruption of science. That has to do with a little company called Monsanto, now bought by Bayer Science. And again, Invasion Biology, Critique of the Pseudoscience by David. And underneath that is a English botanist, Ken Thompson, Where Do Camels Belong? The Story and Science of Invasive Species. That has different titles in different countries, but that's wonderful too. And I'll go on to the others. I do want to keep moving. So from Beyond the War on Invasive Species by Dow Orion, she writes, this ideology of demonizing spreading species as a threat to biodiversity on a scale rivaling climate change took over the mainstream of environmental activism and the biological sciences. Scientific research papers rebranding spreading species as invasives, or in Australia, they're called environmental weeds, burgeoned, filling peer-reviewed journals. The correct botanical and emotionally neutral term, naturalized, was abandoned because it recognized the validity of the process by which species become native to a new place. So that is really key. The terminology has changed. And as I was discussing with another activist on this issue, as George Orwell taught us and me from his book 1984, the words you can get people to repeat affect the way they think. And that is such an innocent statement, but it is absolutely profound. If I can get you to just change the words from new or naturalized to foreign, which has a negative connotation in our culture, especially these days, right? Or, of course, invader, invasive. I mean, that is a loaded term. It is not emotionally neutral. And I would argue it's not a scientific term. And there's no hard definition for these things anyway. And we're going to get more into that, at least a little bit. This is a primer across a giant topic. She goes on, the focus of managing invasive species has moved from import limitations, fines, and penalties, which we all remember going through airports and stuff, moved to herbicide-based eradication control measures. And she puts it very gently. She's soft pedaling, likely influenced by business interests. So she goes into, it's a great book if you want the roots of this stuff. Whereas I say the nativist bus was weaponized, and they pulled it over to the side of the road and put tractor treads on it or tank tracks on it and put flamethrowers and armed it with herbicides. So in 1999, Bush, George, signed Executive Order 13112, creating the NISC, the National Invasive Species Council, and the corollary committee, the Invasive Species Advisory Committee, ISAC, a consortium of academic, professional, and highlighted industry representatives that make invasive species management policy recommendations to the NISC. The order mandates the federal government to, quote, provide for restorations of native species and habitat conditions to ecosystems that have been invaded. So think about that. Again, if even a new plant shows up and it's from somewhere else, you don't need to assess whether it's doing harm or not harm. You can, if you wish, if you are motivated, oh, say, financially, to deem it non-native. Therefore, because it's non-native, it's automatically invading because it's crowding out the good natives. And crowding out is a oft used term we've all used probably. Oh, it's crowding that out. Is it crowding it out? I wonder if it's crowding it out. It doesn't mean it's making a plant extinct. It just means it may not be in that area anymore. And in all cases, I'll say this a few times today, and as these authors have taught me, and this might rankle some of you, I don't know, I wish I could see your faces for many reasons. In all cases, introduced species, so-called non-native species coming to this country and elsewhere, increase biodiversity. And I would, in a Q&A, if I keep talking quickly and leave time, I would ask people who disagree with me on that point, and I'd be surprised if not one person here has a few, well, wait a second, what about kudzu? What about French broom? What about rats on an island? I mean, there's all these exceptions to it. And even if you can push on an exception, and I might yield and say, well, okay, you wouldn't want it there, it's doing harm. That's a far cry from saying all non-natives are invasive. What is invasive? There's no scientific definition. And then, of course, the leap, which this slide talks about, which is we need to eradicate them. And we need to do it with herbicides. That order, 13112, mandates the federal government to provide for restorations of native species and habitat conditions to ecosystems that have been invaded, which established a legal precedent for the relationship between species invasions and restoration. The federal government, by the way, this is about 10 years out of date, allocates $1 billion annually. It's more than that now. I didn't get the exact number. I don't want to exaggerate. I don't need to. $1 billion annually to research and control invasive species, nearly half of which is spent on control measures, including pesticide applications. So that's the loophole you can drive a biotech industry through. It's that there, this is conservative, about 10 years ago when this book was published, saying $500 million. Well, that's just the US. Of course, as you probably all know here, being IDA folks, billions of dollars is spent in the pesticide industry by all your friends who make, well, this is, of course, an agricultural field, but it still can be invaded because it's a crop where we don't want it invaded, taken over by other species. In 2015, the IAR on Cancer, Division of World Health Organization, concluded that glyphosate was probably carcinogenic to humans. And I assume all of you know that's soft pedaling it. Of course, it's carcinogenic. It's an endocrine disruptor, and you can't spray it selectively on these plants and not have it drift elsewhere and do damage, perhaps to those trees in the background and to other, of course, insects and organisms and soil health and on and on and on. Again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. I wish I could see reactions to it, but we'll move on to have some fun. So Bayer bought Monsanto, and I like to say they're working now together to accomplish great things. Um, think of all the invasions they can help stop, natural movements that now can be um, capitalized upon. It's in a new area. We have a mandate to say it shouldn't be there because it wasn't here before. We don't need to do an extensive study proving it's doing harm. We don't need to assess that a new species is doing good potentially. And we'll get into that with some examples I'll show later. And then, of course, California EPA moved to label Monsanto's Roundup carcinogenic. I think Barbara Bogard was on here, thank goodness, and she's working on this issue, as are probably other activists in this call. And it's just, for me, I guess I have the naivety of a child, or maybe it's necessary as an activist to think that speaking the truth out loud will move people. But we have a known carcinogen, the number one selling off the shelf product you can walk in and buy and spray in your backyard. And of course, many more parks and recs departments, including San Francisco. Barbara did a lot of work to with some others, but for certainly was leading the charge to get it banned in Marin County. I don't know if there's any exceptions to that. There usually are some, but of course, people can go to Home Depot, buy this carcinogen, and destroy the invasive weeds in their backyard, which is both redundant and non-scientific. Last quote from her, then I'll stop reading these long tracks. So the council is modeled after an organization launched in California in 1992, first known as the California Exotic Plant Council, but later changed its name, and this is important, to the California Invasive Plant Council. Interesting. Why would it change its name from exotic to invasive? And that, of course, served as a model for similar groups in other states, and it brought together numerous stakeholders, from government agencies, nonprofit conservation orgs, and manufacturers of herbicides and spray equipment. So now, of course, these companies are working their way in with their big money to get on the boards of these councils at the government level, national, state, county, and then if down there it details Monsanto, which was bought by Bayer for $63 billion to show what it was worth 5 years ago. And the stock has dropped, but they'll recover. They'll do just fine, thank you. Has sponsored Cal IPC. We're going to come up to IPC. California Invasive Plant Council since its inception, and both DuPont and Dow AgroSciences, Dow Chemical, have also supported the group. And for what it's worth, you probably don't need this, but this stuff is all in the media. It's easy to find. National Institute of Health says industry sponsorship is a key source of bias affecting research at multiple stages. And on it goes. The second paragraph that I've highlighted there, although less studied and more difficult to define, sponsorship influences the research agenda, namely the initial step in conducting the research. And this is in academia too. I'm just touching on this. It's a huge topic in itself, and I could have done 50 more slides, but I just wanted to tap on these things. And of course, working together to value nature. Jack, what is your problem? Why can't Dow Chemical and the Nature Conservancy work together to protect and value nature? And, you know, there's this, I highlighted that. I used to work in advertising, so I read this stuff and I want to put on the George Carlin voice. We at the Dow Chemical Company and the Nature Conservancy are proud of the progress we've already made towards this goal in our 4 years of working together. And it just goes on with increase in corporate analysis of ecosystem services opportunities across the business world. As Senator Blutarsky would say from the movie Animal House in my childhood, low job. It's just nonsense. But of course, it has real effect. This is from the Nature Conservancy's own website. Singing the evils, the impacts of invasive species. And I want to call your attention to the bottom left highlighted, because there's too much here to take in, folks, and I'm throwing a lot at you, but I'll throw it less at you later. Bottom left, lower left highlighted paragraph. Invasive species have contributed directly to the decline of 42% of the threatened and endangered species in the U.S. Annual cost to U.S. economy estimated at $120 billion a year. So that's the Nature Conservancy. Where did they get that? Where is that from? They don't cite it, but it's not hard to find if you read this stuff. And I'm sorry, one more fun thing, big ag and big pharma, big biotech, of course, is big bucks. These are some of the big players. Across the top level, you may know BASF. Gosh, Swiss or German, I'm blanking out where they're based. Either way, they're worldwide. Bayer, of course, Syngenta, if you've heard of them. some I hadn't heard of. I didn't know about Sumimoto and UPL, whatever that is, Dow's Middle Center. This is what's driving this. Not that there aren't some species, again, to qualify it, you wouldn't want, or that, say, Burmese pythons, we would not want being so aggressive in the Everglades, eating lots of animals. But it's a very different cry to say, okay, now we're going to spray from a helicopter some pesticide to kill the Burmese python and surgically kill the python. Not that they're doing that. They tried to do it with hunters and failed, of course. And Rachel Carson's Silent Spring covered all of this topic 61 years ago. Again, that takes my breath away. So these are different versions of her amazing book that alerted the world, and certainly the American consumer and the American public, to the harms of the toxic pesticide industry, and arguably is one of the authors that jump-started the modern environmental movement. And yet, here we are, 2 steps forward, in some ways 2 steps back, using this product that she was warning about, pesticides, not just Monsanto pesticides, more than ever before. How is that possible? And not that you guys need it, but the obvious thing we all learned in kindergarten holds true, and Rachel Carson covers it as well, but there's a food web. You cannot selectively poison one plant, one rodent, one animal, one anything without affecting a web of life. And this basic ecological common sense tenet is completely ignored. It has to be. Otherwise, you wouldn't say drop thousands of pounds of anticoagulant rodenticide, that's the right image, onto mice on the Faroe Islands to kill only the mice, but do no other harm, because we'll scare the other animals off. Don't you worry, it'll be safe. And in case you guys don't know the fun facts, 93% of Americans have glyphosate residues in their bodies because it's in our foods. And even if you ate just organic, you'll get less of it, but it's still in our foods. I'm sorry, I just can't resist. I have to have fun with this stuff because otherwise it's too depressing. So Cal IPC, this is the modern website right now. Here we are again, the cost of invasive plants. And if you look at the highlight down there, this is the Cornell University study that was cited before, $120 billion annual damage in the US from a researcher named David Pimentel, who's out of Cornell. Makes you wonder what that study is all about. And that's, 2005, that's out of date now, of course. And I just ask for a show of hands if people know the Pimentel study, because it's famous, it's often cited. If you Google it, you'll come up with all these media outlets and environmental groups that cite him as the damages. So how were those numbers arrived at? This is a front page of one of his studies. He's done many. This is the one they're referring to, 2005. And the title, as you can see, is Update on the Environmental Economic Costs Associated with Alien Invasive Species. Just let me check my slide here. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to get into this with 2 more slides. So see what I'm doing here? So I'm just zooming in and I'm highlighting the abstract, which is, fancy research term for saying the summary. Invading alien species in the US cause major environmental damages and losses, adding up to almost 120 billion a year. And then here's the scary part. There are approximately 50,000 foreign species, and the number's increasing. About 42% of them, of the species, on the threatened or endangered species list are at risk primarily because of alien invasive species. And even the last half of that last sentence sends off my advertising alarm bells, where we learned about weasel words. They're at risk. And it's primarily because of, not exclusively because of, and how are they at risk? And how much are they at risk? And where are they at risk? And this is a 15-page study, and it doesn't really address those questions. If anyone wants to email me afterwards, I'm happy to send the PDF to you if you care about getting into the into the weeds on this. But it's fudged, it's sloppy, and I'm going to show you one more example of that, of how fudged and sloppy this nonsense is. A pseudoscience, fancy sounding. There's an abstract. It must be science, but it just doesn't pass the smell test, the common sense check. So I took an hour to kind of you got to even figure out what the chart is on the right. And I highlighted what it is. And those are, if you look on the any of those table figures, which are kind of small and hard to see. I don't know if you can see them on your screen, but it says 27,000, for instance, under plants, crop weeds. Well, it's actually 27,000 times a million. So I just converted the 27,000 million, the 6,000 million, the 1,500 million, to add that up, it's 34.5 billion. And that's crop weeds in pastures, lawns, gardens, golf courses. Excuse me, take a sip of water. And then rats and cats. I mean, think about that. I mean, I could do it. I could do a half-hour talk with an audience because I find this so fascinating. Rats and cats are lumped together under the damage done by invasive species. Those are very different species and have very different effects on very different parts of the country, on very different populations. It is so sloppily thrown together. And for him to say, admittedly, he says these are estimates, but what happens with an estimate, if you put out 100 billion, 60 billion, 250 billion, it doesn't matter the number, that gets taken and people say the number and it's repeated. And then, of course, the loudspeaker of the media grabs it by people who know less than I do. I'm no scientist, but I do a lot of research in this stuff and I've been reading it for years, and that becomes truth. And I'm going to talk about that in a bit too, the power of repeating a lie, which we've seen more recently in politics. That fascinates me as a psychological topic beyond the biological. Even if you just say something enough, invasive species, kill the French broom, it's pushing out the good natives, you'll never get rid of the seed, it's destroying America. If you read that 50 times, even the average person will say, well, God, I've heard that so much, there must be something to it. Oh, and last thing on this slide, you see at the bottom, I had a friend check this because I couldn't be right. Of just those 5 categories, which were the larger categories, granted, I wanted to pull out what are the big ones they're complaining about. It was 131 billion. It exceeds the 120 billion of his estimate. He says almost 120, meaning under. He's being conservative, but I added up his numbers, and the numbers don't even check. So again, I'm a cautious fellow at times, all with my histrionics. I could be mistaken about this addition, but I had someone else check it who's better at math than I am. And I'm happy to send this to anybody, which is to say the original PDF, if anyone is a researcher type and loves getting into this stuff like I do. It's just not sound, demonstrable, repeatable science with really efficient studies, repeatable, which science must be to be actual science. Oh, that's the same slide. Sorry about that, kids. And, it's preying on fear. That's, this whole movie poster hardware. I got off on this thing. I was just having so much fun finding these, but this is what alien invasives, that's why you change the language. It has an effect. I remember reading a wonderful book by Jerry Mander, who recently passed away, unfortunately, called 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. If anyone's heard of that, amazing book. I read it 30 years ago. And I remember where I read it because it had such an impact on me. It spoke about you can watch a TV show knowing it's just a TV show, and these aren't real people. They're actors reading dialogue. And yet the way we are wired, we think it's real. It still goes in as real because a person's saying it. So similar to that effect, you can be told, all this ridiculous scare stuff. And if you see this stuff again and again and again, you can still find yourself scared. By the way, the one on the left is real. The one on the right, I made up. Because that creature on the right, I forget the name of the actual movie, looks like a giant Brussels sprout. And of course, it's always with the blonde, well, not always blonde, but young white woman that the monsters come for, which shows you what kind of gender is writing these scripts and making this artwork from the era. And of course, everyone's favorite, which is so silly, ha, but this is not really an exaggeration of what we're at right now. And I'm going to get into that as well. And did you know this, folks? 8.5% of Americans have kinematophobia. I bet you didn't. No one knew that word. Fear of zombies, moving dead fear of the moving dead. And unless I'm mistaken, and I might get into a controversy here, but zombies aren't real. And yet people actually have a fear of them. And that goes to the phenomenon I'm talking about, which is at play in horror movies and at play with invasive species. You keep hearing something long enough, you begin to believe it. It's why when we all saw Jaws, well, most of us who saw Jaws got afraid of going out into the ocean, even though the chances of a shark attack were 1 in a million, perhaps literally. So propaganda works. And of course, chemical companies know this and have weaponized their ads so that even, here's back to the cow IPC, this is their old logo. And they're teaching kids to kill wild plants and animals. And I'll say that because, let's see, reading the top right, physical control highlight in blue, manual methods. How can I get rid of this nasty stuff called ice plant, which I'll talk about in a minute in case any of you like it, or excuse me, hate it and think it should go. Highway ice plant is easily removed by hand pulling, making it a good target for community or school group restoration projects. Because the plant can grow roots, blah, 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 blah. It's hard to get rid of. So this is ice plant. This is from South Africa. I didn't know what ice plant was till I moved to San Francisco out by the ocean. And there's lots of this stuff in the dunes of San Francisco down to Pacifica and all the way down to Baja. Ice plant. It's in Point Reyes National Seashore. And I know they're trying to eradicate it and they want to tear it out. Now, many places they're good little campers and they're not using pesticides. But as I say, they're taking kids out or adults out. And what are we going to do? We're going to help nature by tearing out the invasive non-native ice plant. And you know what? I'm actually going to stop the share for a moment, if I can, and close this up, come back to ice plant. Can people see me again? Yes. So here's the thing, ice plant. For those of you who say it's an invasive and crowding out, and I don't know where you guys are in this, so I just want to do this briefly, but it is a plant. It was brought here. There are areas where it carpets a whole hillside, where whatever was there before, these so-called native species that was there for hundreds of years, has been pushed out, crowded out. It has not, to the best of my knowledge, anyone's out there welcome to, again, correct me, when you do Q&A, made anything go extinct. And importantly, when assessing whether something is invasive, and that's, again, a non-scientific term, but broadly meaning doing harm, and we should be worried about it, I always say, let's do a cost-benefit analysis, a spreadsheet. Is it doing anything any good? Is it stabilizing the hillsides? Yes, even though it's shallow-rooted, but that's how it grows in the sand. Is it producing oxygen? Yes. Preventing erosion? Yes. Flowering? Yes. Bees pollinate off it? Yes. Is it killing anything? Well, and this is where you get into the circular reasoning of invasion biology. Well, yes, Jack, you're wrong. It's crowding out the good native plants that were there before the South African, of course it's African, right? There's a little euphemism there for scared whitey in this country. That it's pushing out the good plants, the native ones. That's the harm it's doing. But bear with me now, and I hope all you guys know this, and if you don't, you'll hear me out. It's circular logic. It's bad because it's pushing out the good plant. And the good plant is good because it's native, not because of anything it's doing per se, because the ice plant does much of the same ecological benefit to a sand dune, which we want to stabilize and support other plants and animals who might eat it, and all the other benefits of a plant. It's just a plant. And then, of course, it's bad because it's non-native and pushing out the good plants. And there's no science to that. It's just preying on people's fear of the foreigner. So back to it. Okay, so let's see. Are you seeing this, everyone? Yes?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Okay, and of course, CDFW, California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
We are seeing the images on the side, just to let you know.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. I won't stop it again. Let me do, I gotta hit play. Okay, are we good now? Thank you, Lisa. You can unmute. I need you. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so here it is again. This is the bad thing about ice plant. Unfortunately, this is the highlight. ice plant spreads easily. So it's bad for spreading easily, which doesn't, okay, why is spreading, it's only if it's doing harm, would that be a problem? So why is there that unfortunate? And it's become invasive in coastal California from Humboldt to Baja. Okay, invasive how? Those are just words. What do you mean? When it establishes, it forms a large, thick mat. Okay, as in the picture there under the lighthouse, that here we go, chokes out all other native plants and alters the soil composition. Okay, so those are two claims. It's choking out all of the native plants. And I would say it's pushing it out of some areas to be sure, like in the picture above, but not everywhere. It's not making a plant, in this case, ice plant, making some other plants go extinct. And I'll do you one better. I'm sure there's some cases where introduced species do crowd out and do make extinct some local species. Now, I know that there's a 1 in 10 in 10 rule about that, which is from these books that 1 out of 10 species brought in are actually considered invasive. And of those 10, only 1 is actually making anything go away, go extinct. I think I have that right. And forgive me, that is sloppy, and I will correct that thinking. I want to be precise with this stuff. But it's a tiny percentage of plants or animals that are brought in that actually do something we don't want them to do, and they're doing harm. And I would be pressed to, I would acknowledge it. But to extrapolate from those rare exceptions to what we have today, which is everybody's walking around saying, the eucalyptus are invasive, the French broom is invasive. No, Jack, you don't understand, it's taken over. It is used in the popular media and the popular discourse so much, it's a pathology. So to go back to this, it chokes out all the native plants and alters the soil composition. Well, I'm sure it does. All plants alter the soil composition to varying degrees. Redwoods create what the nativists would call a monoculture. You know, what redwood sorrel grows under redwoods, but not a lot of other things. That's why you walk into a grove of redwoods and there's not a lot of other plants the way there would be in, say, a maple grove or aspen grove in other parts of the country. So yeah, plants alter the soil. That's not bad per se. And then it says, because it's a coastal invader, back to the label, it competes with many endangered. Well, of course it competes. All plants are competing and working it out. And some are interdependent and some intermingle. And it's just, this is the definition of sophistry. Sophistry. It sounds reasonable, but it's not actually factual. And then, of course, again, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the last little highlighted bit, ice plant removal provides a good volunteer day for student groups. Teach the kids to go out and to tear up plants because, you know, we don't need any more plants. There's too many plants. It's nuts. I just got involved in this one thanks to In Defense of Animals, who let me work as a consultant and kind of get up to speed quickly. I'm not an expert, but these are mule deer, Catalina Island, and there's an effort now by the Catalina Island, of course, ironically, Conservancy, the CIC, Catalina Conservancy, to hire helicopters and gunships and shoot 1,000 deer to eradicate the deer population, the mule deer population, because they were brought to the island 90 years ago and are considered an invasive species. They shouldn't be there. To which I say, well, let's analyze that. They shouldn't be there because why? Because they were brought there. Okay, well, that's circular. Now they're doing harm. The claim is they're eating native plants. Has there been a thorough and exhaustive study showing that, in fact, the deer are eating the plants and making those good plants with tremendous benefit that no other plant can provide and making them go away? Nope, no such study. It's all hearsay and just people telling each other stories. And of course, the tough thing with these issues is, well, why are they doing it? And there's speculation as to that, but no proof. Because, you know, somebody who wants to make money and get money for their agency to do something or to protect their vineyard that happens to be in Catalina Island, they're not going to say that. They'll just say the mule deer were brought here. They're eating the plants. We don't want to fence the plants because that's too obvious. And then Jack would be able to stop doing a rant. And instead, we go to these extreme measures to kill the invasive deer. Nonsense. And then, of course, Newsweek. I found this today, by the way, literally today. Cannibalistic house mice destroying the ecosystem of California islands. And that's what's in the Farallon Islands. This little guy, Mus musculus, house mouse, restoration means extermination. Farallons are 26 miles off the coast of California. This one, as a consultant for IDA, been working on this a bit. It's always kill them all. It's not there's a problem we want to deal with or find out why or see if they're integrated. The mice have been there 150 years, but it's we must kill them all. And how are we going to do that? With Rodificum, a second generation anticoagulant rat poison, which is some nasty stuff. And it will look, it's warning poison, deadly to dogs. I wonder if it's good on people. I wonder if it's good for any other animal or the thousands of nesting birds in the Farallones. We're going to drop it from helicopters in bait baskets like the one you see there. So that little guy up there, who's just insanely destroying everything, he must die by eating that poisonous bait block. And then we're going to shoo away all the other animals. So these guys, which is tens of thousands of nesting birds, that's a western gull on the bottom right. I actually forget what I've got a big picture of here, this large flock of birds. But we're going to shoo all those away. We'll haze them away while we do a poison drop over multiple days, literally tons of Brodificum toxic rat poison in a national marine sanctuary. That's how crazy it is. And that's the other smell test on all this. It's so extreme. What is going on here? It's going on everywhere. Once again, ignoring the food web, just ignoring it all. I can't show this slide because it would be making fun of two conservation companies, so I won't show it and never did. But I can show these, which might as well be there. These are spoof ads, which pretty much tell the story that we make our living killing. Help us kill. Support our island poisoning campaigns. And if you call it restoration, indeed, you literally can get away with murdering literally thousands of animals. And as IDAers, I know you're appalled at that. And the good news is there's some science and common sense supporting your thought that this can't be science. It ain't. It's pseudoscience, or if you prefer, non-science. And I've just got to do one piece of this just to prove this thing is wonderful. This is so insane that it deserves a song. Bear with me.
Remember that you need to add the sound when if you're going to share that.
I already did at the start of this, I think, or do I need to do it again?
Well, we could try it and see.
Okay, good point. Let's see if you can. Can you hear that? Can you hear sound of the helicopter? Nope.
No.
Hang on, folks. Please stand by. This will be fun, I promise you. Let's see.
If you go back to the share when you're sharing it, when you're looking at the options for the share,
I am looking at that right now. There's
the very bottom left after you go through all the different images.
Share computer sound. Got it. Thank you. Okay, theoretically, this will work. Thanks for your patience, folks. This is fun because, you know, when you're doing depressing stuff, like I say, I need to do it with humor so I don't go insane. And it also is a great way to open people's eyes up to see something from a new perspective. Can you hear it, Lisa?
You see, in every restoration done, you must kill every single one. Point the poison gun and bam! Their worthless lives are done. Islands we undertake are a bloody piece of cake. A lark, a spree, kill every mouse we see. With a spoonful of poison drive the population down. The population down, the population down. Just a spoonful of poison can kill every mouse around in a bloody violent way. A mother mouse minding her nest has very little time to rest while gathering food scraps to feed her young. While quite intent in her pursuit, our poison makes her efforts moot. Our green bait blocks kill babies like a pox. For just a spoonful of poison moves her families all down. Her families all down. Her families all down. Just a spoonful of poison bleeds out every mouse in town in a slow and gruesome way. The helicopters that rain death onto islands out at sea spew jet fuel with their buzzing to and fro. The brodificum that they drop blows into oceans with a plop. And hence, fish fine, mankind is not so kind. Every critter takes a nip at the pellets we let slip. Oh no, winds blow, poison blue whales down below. Just a spoonful of poison makes all animals fall down, all animals fall down, animals fall down. Just a spoonful of Brody, the most potent death we found. It's a homicidal wave.
The job's a game.
A spoonful of poison drive the population down, the population down.
I'm going to cut that short because we're running out of time, of course, as anticipated. And let me go back to my show. In fact, I just got a couple more slides here because I did want to leave a little time for talk, and I'll beg Lisa if we can stay longer for those who want to. But we're waging a war against nature, and if we win, we will find ourselves on the losing side. No surprise. The books again. Yeah, if you want to take a screen snapshot of that, anybody, I'll hold it there for another moment while you can do a screen snap. And of course, I can send you a JPEG of these, which is what this is. These 8 books are wonderful. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to IDA for putting this gig on. I would love to do it again with more people because this message needs to get out. And this has been a talk about invasion biology, a pseudoscience that is doing tremendous harm just when we need to be protecting and not killing. I'm sorry, I've got a sense of humor. Give me that old-time Dominion. Dominion is from dominus, which is to dominate, which is what we are doing with our management practices also, which is a whole nother conversation. So let me end this and see if I can take a few questions from folk or comments. I'm guessing people are going to want to talk a bit. And I think you can do that now. Lisa, do you want to help moderate or however we want to do this in the little time we have left? And I'd also beat you to the punch and say, I'm willing to stay longer, even if you need to go for your next appointment. If you want to give the share to me, I'll hang out and talk till the cows come home. Is that the expression? With folks, and turn the recording off when we're done. So, Lisa?
Thank you to everybody for joining us for this while and for hearing some of Jack's thoughts on this. And this is a great opportunity to ask questions. We want to hear from you. And so we've got some, you can raise a hand and then we'll go to you. Also, we have some people who have questions in the chat. So first we'll go to the raised hands and then we'll go to the chat. So Gina, you're welcome to unmute yourself if you'd like.
Hi, I will share my very messy appearance. I'm an attorney and I'm trying to get back into animal law. And I was wondering, I don't know, I do more companion animal and farmed stuff. And I was wondering, but I've been reading lately about the compound, I think it's compound 1080. Is that what it is? What's used? And then M44. And I was just wondering if, I had a client who was suing a pesticide company for a tenting situation where I know it's, animals are like wandering, and there's a lot of very specific rules about using rodenticide in California in particular. And I was wondering if, I don't know if IDA have been following you guys ever since I was a kid, but I don't, and I'm from the Bay Area, but I don't know if you all are doing any litigation around these issues, and if so, I'm curious to see what your angle is. If you've been able to get like a human hook, because I know that's the easiest way to bring lawsuits. I can see the companion animal angle, but I'm wondering if there's been any kind of threats to humans and if that's made its way into any litigation.
So IDA is not, as far as I know, but let me give you my phone number and everybody else at the same time. Anybody's welcome to call me on any of this stuff. I am a committed activist, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about any of this, as long as you don't curse my name. Well, actually, you know what? You can. I don't want to inhibit your free speech. Here's my number, Gina, if you want to ask me more about that, and I can probably give you references to other animal attorneys and maybe other sources. But IDA is not currently involved in litigation with any of that.
Okay.
My phone number, folks, the old-fashioned way, 415 area code 488-4200. It's a landline, so don't try texting me. You actually have to call and leave voicemail because, that slows down the riffraff. So I'm being clipped because I do want to get to a few other people. And I could also read into the chat here. Barbara Bogard as well. What do you mean when you say a plant is native? Native as of what date? Thank you, Barbara. That's a basic that I didn't cover because I've been putting this together on the fly for the last couple of weeks, and it's still poorly shaped. There's no such date. There's kind of a consensus with what I call the nativists that it was, with European immigration. Well, European immigration has been going on for hundreds of years, starting when? 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, all of those years. And even with that 400-year span, what about the Vikings before then? What about, it's just, what's the scientific basis for that demarcation? And Barbara, you could probably speak as eloquently as I could, or better, about why that's just not scientific. It doesn't matter when it came. Species have always been on the move. And anyway, Lisa, is there another person who wants to speak? I do want to give people who are willing to be seen priority.
Sure. Let's see here. Just checking. And I'm not seeing any other hands raised at the moment. But we do have some questions. So let's see. We've got lots of them.
Do you do them in order from the top or from the bottom? I guess when they first... Oh, Maggie, have any of the authors of the books you posted, have they been able to provide a definition of what is native? Well, no. They all say, the critics of this stuff, they wouldn't give a hard definition. If you go onto a website of some of the nativists, they will say European immigration, but they won't say from 1612 to so-and-so, nor can they explain why that should be set. It ultimately becomes arbitrary, just like that Pimentel paper I was showing you. And oh, by the way, the other point I wanted to mention, there's just so much here. It's such a giant topic. If you kill all the native people in America, just hypothetically, and kill all their animals and bring in European cattle and put up a fence around them, which I would say is a massive invasion of an actual species, no fault of the poor cow, and a victim himself, doing massive harm. If any pathogen, plant, or animal threatens the economics of that horrifically cruel, environmentally catastrophic system, that's considered an invasive species, according to Pimentel, because it has economic value. So just that alone should prove how insane, absurd, and unscientific these labels are. It's really kind of made up just to cut and paste as you please to benefit, ultimately in our society, chemical companies who want to sell their poisons, or with the USDA, with Wildlife Services, sell their services with contractors to come in and kill thousands of wild animals. That, how dare they infringe on the economics of our cattle industry, which is the ultimate blight on the land these days. Someone asked,
Barbara Bogard is asking to share. She's here.
Go, Barbara. Unmute, which you're doing.
Jack, I just wanted to add that I think it was in the Theodopoulos, or whatever that guy's name is, talk from years ago from Berkeley, where he actually says that there's no way that looking at a plant, just examining it in any way, you can tell whether it's native. There is nothing that you can say, oh, this is a native plant, just by examining it. It's a made up, this whole issue is plant xenophobia, as far as I'm concerned. This whole native plant issue didn't begin, but it really thrived in Nazi Germany.
Yep.
And it's the same sort of concept as, purity of blood or whatever in people.
Purity of landscape, purity of biota, purity of soil.
Yes.
It is true. It has similar, it's not that the Nazis did it, It's
No.
the same strain of thinking and has been used recently with the Mexicans streaming across the border,
Yes.
drinking our water, taking our jobs. And it doesn't, the truth is, there's something there. You know, you don't want, I mean, no one wants across this political spectrum open borders with people flooding in and, you know, but that's politics aside, it's the same fear of the foreigner, which is, it is metaphorically speaking, in our blood. We have reason to be afraid of the foreign. That's, you know, historically and archaeologically, we were afraid of things that were foreign and could harm us. So it's playing on that ancient primordial fear in us to then demonize, well, biological xenophobia is the term I heard, Barbara, that you're referring to.
Yeah.
Where you fear a plant. I mean, I've seen people go out, nice people, some of my friends, like, I want to pull out the broom, I want to fix, you know, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. And rather than saying it's the climate crisis from burning fossil fuels and eating meat and dairy, I don't know, but I can kill that plant, which shouldn't be here, and that'll make it the way it was, to make it better. Nonsense. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Jack. Great presentation.
Well,
Thanks.
thanks.
We really need a lot of this. This one, as far as I'm concerned, nativism is a religion.
Yeah. Well, it's an
And
ideology. Exactly.
It's really hard to communicate this to people. So thank you for trying. Really appreciate it.
And by the way, that talk at Berkeley from David Theodoropoulos, I made an effort to pronounce his Greek name. That was the talk where my light bulb went off. I have that talk on my hard drive because it was so important to me. And I remember him saying, you can't tell by looking at it. And I'm still, you know, as with new concepts, still digesting what that means and trying to, he's a teacher of mine, I'm a student, you learn something and a good student brings it to life in the student's own way, which I'm still doing. I mean, I'm showing horror movie posters, which he wasn't doing. He wasn't a comedian. Not that I am either, but I try, you know, to make it lively and fun for a young audience and all. I wish there was lots of 20-year-olds in the crowd here, but so many of them are in academia now, which has been completely poisoned by corporate money. And they're out there, you know, doing, it's like victory gardens, like demonstration forests, which are logged and thinned, which are, by the way, the same interchangeable terms, to make them safe in fire. That's a whole nother topic, which I will be talking about. Get out of nature, leave it alone. We don't need to be, we should not, don't need to be. We're destroying the planet while pretending to save it, driven by corporate greed and then people's ignorance and fear.
Good, because Jack, we should talk offline because we're fighting right now with Marin MW Pack or whatever it is, the wildfire people who were decimating trees, using poison. We're on a rampage right now against them. So let's connect on that. Thanks.
We'll talk, darling. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a verbal question, Lisa, or should I just pull into the chat and read some more?
I think let's look at the chat at the moment.
Okay. Cindy Hewitt, I listened to a podcast, treatment of rodenticide poisoning, lots of secondary accidental poisoning. Yes, indeed, Cindy. I mean, again, you can't poison large amounts surgically. Even if you go around with a little sprayer and just put it on the stumps of the trees you kill, which you shouldn't be killing, we need more trees, then you have what's called drift. And rain washes I mean, they might last only 6 months, but that's enough time to do damage to other organisms and to the soil. Let's see here. Someone says, look at issues, Susan Kirk, look at issues in a whole sense, assess ecosystems, see if an action by humans is needed to support or plan and take action that's too low or no risk. So in other words, again, look at an entire ecosystem. Don't just target one plant and kill it, and now you've fixed that ecosystem. Utterly unscientific. Gruesome and cruel, says Claudia. Yes, agreed. Thanks for the info. What's your perspective on control of deer population in urban areas? That's a tricky but very fair question. And I would say, which area? It's specifics. There's no one treatment. I mean, certainly, I mean, I live near Mill Valley, which is a town, Mount Tamalpais, and the animals wander in. And of course, they keep building up into the mountain. There are lots of deer populations because we humans are so afraid of predators. God forbid there's one mountain lion, coyote, or deer that could do us harm, or bear or wolf that could do us harm. We kill the predators. And then, yeah, you can have lots and lots of deer reproducing, but there's no one answer to that. And so I'm not even going to try to take a stab at it generally. It's specific. And the one specific I do know a little bit about is the Catalina Island deer population. The other trick with these, as an activist, you often want to say, just don't do a giant poison drop and kill everything. And then strategically, they say, yeah, but you got to give people to do something. You have to give them some other alternative to do. And that's a whole strategy discussion. And it's very painful that we humans are human doings more often than we are human beings. Just let nature do what nature does best. And of course, we're part of nature, which makes it complicated. So it gets down to, again, specific ecosystems, specific issues, if there is an issue, determining whether it's doing harm, how much harm it's doing, whether that's a harm that is not necessarily something we should try to prevent. Could we prevent it? How would we prevent it? Would the way we prevent it do even more harm? All of these very reasonable, calm, analytical questions need to be addressed. And it's so rarely going on now. We're cutting down trees to make it safe from wildfire, which is insane. It's burning down, destroying the village in order to save it. What is it, Vietnam? Anyone else? You've got to have something to say, kids. Come on.
Oh, there's
Don't
some great
die.
questions here. There's one by Laria
Please.
Cottingham who says, how do you reckon with the fact that many non-native plants contribute to reduced biodiversity in a region, particularly plants that thrive in disturbed areas opposed to plants that are adapted to undisturbed areas?
So I took 55 minutes from my talk. I had a whole section on French broom, Scotch broom,
Spanish broom.
Spanish broom. Thank you. There's one more too. I was looking at the Latin names. Anyway, there's like 4 of them that are common now. And I have never seen an area in the Bay Area where I live where someone could prove to me conclusively, or even show me anecdotally, boy, that shouldn't be here. Look at the harm it's doing. It's a pioneer species, is a word I was taught, which is it tends to grow very well in disturbed areas. If you cut a fire road, you'll see it growing heavily, like acacia on the side of a fire road, to which I say, oh, look at that beautiful flowering plant, sequestering carbon, stabilizing soil, producing oxygen, making pretty flowers. It's a pollinator plant. It's not killing anything else. And it grows really well in disturbed areas. Thank you, broom. I thank you. God, if I could convince one person to just maybe backpedal and not think to do what I was told when I moved to a house in Marin a decade ago by my contractor, oh, Jack, you got to pull out all the broom. And I started doing that because, oh, it's a bad plant, until I learned otherwise. It wasn't doing any harm. And I was there 10 years. It didn't destroy the place. It didn't make anything else go extinct. So when somebody says it's crowding out another species, I would say, well, locally or through an entire county or state, like kudzu, is the big thing in the South. And I've read a lot about kudzu in a lot of these books, and it didn't make anything disappear. And even if it did, I would say, is that necessarily a bad thing? But of course, as we older white folks in charge of things wax nostalgic and have fear about what's happening genuinely to environment, I would say because of climate crisis, because of fossil fuels and eating meat and dairy, primary drivers, we're upset and we want to do something. And it's an easy target, but I would ask people to question, well, again, French broom, I consider it a wonderful plant and an environmental activist and citizen scientist. I will go by her first name. She's not out there the way I am on the media, named Bev, had a wonderful phrase that just summed it all up so beautifully. I mean, she just moved me. She's the one that taught me, how I learned to stop worrying and love the French broom. And that was her phrase, we, meaning we citizens and scientists and activists, just want them, which is those people who would kill plants, we just want them to stop killing things. Don't target plants and animals in the wild or gone wild for eradication, extermination, which they call removal. Always the language, the Orwellian language, removal. No one will object removal. Whereas if I say I'm going to kill 1,000 mule deer on Catalina Island from a helicopter, that's going to upset a lot of people, as well it should. And I'm not conclusively saying, I haven't been to that island to visit and say, oh yeah, they really are doing damage there. But I know that eradication, killing all of them with high-powered rifles from a helicopter, is certainly not an answer, nor have they done the studies to justify any kind of massive extermination anyway.
So there's a couple of specific comments. One of them mentions the wild horses. And the other one, I know we have a person who's joined us, Kelly, if she's still here. She was advocating for swans because they're also considered invasive, the mute swans, and then they are the targets of the government roundups in many states.
So the person is asking for my opinion about mute swans.
Well, they were saying that the
Or saying it is a problem.
wild horses is a great example that about one of the animals that are killed by these because they're non-native, even though that can be actually debated.
Wild horses, I know a little bit about from Ginger, our recently retired incredible activist who is super knowledgeable. We do have a resource at IDA, not for the 1080 poison issue that someone was asking about, but about wild horses. If anybody has a real hard question about that, we have an expert named Ginger. But she has taught me at least the basics, and Lisa will keep an eye on me, make sure I'm correct on this, which is, for the most part, wild horses do no damage, except the cattle industry doesn't like them. And the cattle industry wants the BLM lands for themselves. They get cheap grazing rights, and horses infringe on those rights. So once again, it's the cattle industry, which is probably the most, well, by far the most destructive livestock industry, arguably one of the most destructive blights on the planet, not just in America, but in, cutting down Amazon rainforest to raise cattle for human consumption, cutting down the lungs of the earth, the rainforest forest, the Amazon rainforest to raise cattle. So wild horses, not a damage that I know of other than to the cattle industry. Mule, sorry, what was the other one? The other species?
Well, the other one, this is the mute swan.
Mute swan. I got an easy answer to that. Haven't read up on the mute swan. I don't know about it. I'm not authorized to speak with any authority on that, let alone.
Well, I will say, for anyone who's concerned, we do have at IDA a National Goose Protection Coalition, and we have several experts in swans and also in geese, especially with the mute swan situation, which also is a political issue that goes back many years. What Gina had said before was that the conservationists advocate for rounding up wild horses and killing them because they are allegedly destroying native species. But the horses are just, well, scapegoats. Yep. It is the ranchers causing the problems, which is what Jack had mentioned as well.
Yeah, no, and that's that phenomenon, by the way, behind me, these beautiful guys are Tule elk, and they are blamed by the adjacent ranches, private ranches inside a national park, 20 miles from where I'm sitting here in Marin County in San Francisco. The elk are blamed for giving Jonas disease to cattle. And they don't do it too publicly, but it's there. It's in the media. You can find it. And of course, cattle, Jonas is a wasting disease passed on by manure. It's very common in cattle. 10 years ago, there was a pest of the dairy cows in Point Reyes Seashore, and half of the herds had Jonas disease. It is rare in elk. And the only reason some of the elk do have Jonas is from the cattle. So it's a perfect example, like with the wild horses, where you blame the victim so you can kill the victim and continue to victimize and exterminate. I don't use the word remove or kill. Well, kill's okay, but eradicate the wildlife that is threatening, economics ultimately.
There's another specific question that is about lionfish in the Caribbean coral reefs. They were wondering what your opinion was.
Is that in the chat here? I'm just looking at.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. What about the lionfish? Okay, great question, Claudia. I don't know. I've never actually heard about that issue. I don't know anything about lionfish and Caribbean coral reefs. Don't know.
And there was also a reference to.
You know what? I have an answer for you, though. The answer is not, assuming lionfish are doing harm in coral reefs, the answer is not to spread lots of toxic poisons in the water to kill the lionfish. That wouldn't be a solution. But I don't know the issue to tell you more.
Well, let's have Janice ask her question, then we'll come back to some ones in the chat.
Hi, I am the chair of the Sierra Club Marin Group, and we are working we have a letter of concern into Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority to stop using herbicides in their vegetation management and fuel reduction practices in Marin County. They have $19 million per year to do this work from our Measure C tax funds. Do you have any practical suggestions or, I don't know, anything that could help us move them? Because just as you've been, stating throughout this whole session, they believe in native plants, and they're spraying in areas that are even in my town in San Anselmo, they are spraying on the hillsides, and it's draining into where there's schools and play fields, and of course it gets into the San Anselmo Creek and goes out to the bay. So any suggestions?
Yes. Give me your name and number and I'll call you if you're comfortable.
Sure, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it gives me an opportunity to say one of my favorite new, it's my quote of the last 2 months. I just love it so much. I saw it on a TV show. It's, God, I'm sorry, I'm a little razzed out. I've been at this since 8 this morning. But the saying, St. Augustine, the truth, and this is indirectly what we'll talk about when we speak about a strategy for how to deal with the folks who want to use poisons in San Anselmo or anywhere else for that matter. The truth is like a lion. There's no need to defend it. Set it loose and it will defend itself. So as an activist, that means tell the public in various ways, social media, traditional media, demonstrations, how toxic this stuff is, that it probably, I don't need to know more about your issue, won't do as claimed, or what they're trying to attack isn't necessarily, it won't be an effective way of dealing with the supposed problem, if there even is a problem, and shout it from the rooftops. We have been effective with the issue. These guys behind me are actually going to get the fence removed next year, we think, because the Park Service reversed policy because we made so much noise and caused so much trouble with a large group of activists. And of course, you build your movement, you build a feeling of community. Instead of getting together to kill plants, you get together a community for the Sierra Club and up your membership, which you want to do. And you don't feel you're alone in the world. This is why I sing the praises of activism and building community, as I do with meeting all the animal rights activists I've been working with the past year at In Defense of Animals. And you can win this stuff. It's hard to beat it back. It's hard. We're certainly the minority, but there is a power to the truth. And citizens outnumber the poisoners. And citizens don't want to be poisoned and walk around environments where there's Roundup, glyphosate, and the nastier adjuvants with the glyphosate in their neighborhoods. And it's I don't even know a place where you must use glyphosate. It must be used there. It's not for fire control. And by the way, goats is a whole other topic I don't want to go off on, but that ain't the answer either. And again, case by case, where's the place? Poison's completely outlawed. Do you know Norm LaForce of the Bay Area chapter Sierra Club? I don't know if he's still in action.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so it's a necessary tool in the toolkit. We need to use poisons, but he is said in 1952, God bless him, and he can't change. He's just not able to change on any of this stuff. So he is now
same as a lot of these folks on the authority.
Unfortunately, but again, we do have the numbers. If within your organization you're allowed to actually, and I'm not kidding, I had to wince, if you're allowed to speak the truth, it is very powerful. And it's just, I mean, if you say this stuff is toxic, and there are lymphoma cases about Roundup, glyphosate, like
endless.
Argue. What's that?
Endless studies on glyphosate.
Right. So, I mean, how's the stuff sold and people are just using it casually? And that's the power of advertising and propaganda, which is why I'm an activist who likes to do songs. Songs. How are you going to win? You sing a crazy song that gets under people's skin and in their heads. Did you send me your?
I did.
Why can't...
No, I didn't. I didn't send it.
You can just tell it to me. I actually.
No, let's just if you don't mind me saying, please put it in the chat, because it's in. This will be on our YouTube channel, and so I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with their own privacy.
Well, that's right, because the chat goes away. It's actually more private. Thank you, Lisa, for that tip. I was thinking the other way around, but you're right. Don't say it. Very good.
So in terms of, also wanted to mention Kate, who was a friend of mine from Philadelphia. She was saying that if an animal is given the label of invasive, it seems like no treatment of them is too cruel.
Yes. In fact, you give it the label and it becomes, well, sorry, I'm going to go there. Mexicans are rapists and murderers. Well, now they're bad. That poor person who got, kicked out of an asylum is a bum. Now we use the term homeless, but that begins to take on the negative connotation. So yeah, you call the animal or the plant an invader, invasive, alien. And then, yeah, who's my friend quoted me, I forget who the philosopher was. He says, when you label me, you negate me. Kierkegaard or someone. It's a little intellectual, but I do like that. Yeah, and that's why I'm really careful with my language, especially when I make the mock ads. It's never use the word remove, It's kill, exterminate, eradicate, restoration and conservation. Those words have been co-opted. I don't use them very often because they're vague and they sound nice. Like biodiversity. We're saving biodiversity. Again, a couple books I have around me. I'm swimming in these books right now. And that graphic I showed you, they say all cases. I even soft pedal it and say in a vast majority of cases, an introduced species, which people call an invader or invasive, increases biodiversity. Now there's that plant here too, and it interacts with the ecosystem in incredibly complex chemical interactions, which we poor fool humans can't begin to understand. Well, Simone Simard and a few others have begun to, wow, can you believe it? The plants are actually communicating in the soil, interspecies, and working it out together. They're not out to just kill each other. No, that's our human way of dealing with each other all too often, projected onto the plant world, which is much more at peace than the human world is, the world of humanity.
And I just wanted to give a little example of some of the effects of the invasion biology. When I was in Philadelphia, there was a group of students, and their job for the summer, they were like college students, and they were there. There were two different types of turtles. One was a red-eared slider, and the other was a different type. And one of them, I can't remember which one, was non-native, and the other one was deemed native. And so the job of those students for the summer was to kill the one species while the other ones were to thrive. So that's an example of how this can be done. And the invasive ones, actually, people are hired and paid oftentimes to kill these animals, from crayfish to wild hogs. That people are killing literally like millions and spending just as much on killing these animals. So, and there are conflicts that we have with some of these animals, but it's also not removing the conflict to remove the animals, especially when it's not possible to remove all of them. So these are some big issues that are going on.
And I would go back to the cost benefit analysis too. Like we had cats that live in the woods, and every once in a while one would not come back. We assume a coyote got it. Well, that's really upsetting. I love my kitty cat. I don't want to be eaten by a coyote, but I wanted him to have a wild life, shorter. But that's our decision as the guardian. But my God, hearing those coyotes sing at night and knowing they're there, occasionally seeing one on a run or a walk at night, for me, that was a tremendous benefit. And, like Edward Abbey, I'm willing to have wildness in my life, which means sometimes out of control, sometimes harm, sometimes fear. But that's the trade-off of being alive. Otherwise, let's stay in our houses, wear a helmet, wear a safety belt, even when you're in your Barcalounger, and now you're safe. You're kind of dead, but hey, you're safe. It's like Wall-E, the people moving around the cruise ship in space in the chairs, just eating Coke and French fries, and they're safe on that ship. Not the life I want. And unfortunately, as it seems to be an older crowd here, and a lot of kids don't get out into nature the way we did. I was off leash and got to play in the woods, and that's one reason I love wild animals so much. Especially, I love all animals, but especially the wild ones, because they give me joy just by seeing them. After this talk, rather than do social media like a good little camper I'm supposed to, I've been out my desk since 8 this morning. I'm going to walk into the hills where I live, just on the other side of San Anselmo in Terra Linda, and go up on the ridge trail and actually sit out there with some food, perhaps, and see if I can hear a coyote. I hope he crawls up and pets and wants to pet me or bite me. I don't care, any of it. I just want to be with the animals, the wild ones especially.
So I think we're coming to the end of our talk today, and thanks to everyone for staying. If there's another question that you have that's burning, please raise your hand or put it into the chat, and just letting everyone know you will get a recording of this in a few days. And we really are very grateful to you for being part of this. I know in some circles this is very controversial, and we wanted to hear what all of you had to say about it, and also to have the privilege of Jack's research for all these years that he's done.
And if anybody wants me to do a presentation to their group, I'm open to suggestions about that. I'm a consultant with IDA, but I also, have my Tree Spirit project, and I love going to any audience. Live better, but just this stuff needs to get out. And this recording, Lisa, will be posted eventually on IDA's Facebook page also. Is that true?
It will be posted on our YouTube channel. We have that was a great question, Jack. All of our fireside chats are in a little playlist on our YouTube channel. This one's called Fireside Chats. And as you scroll down, you'll be able to see the one from Jack.
Will we send out an email to the people who signed up for this saying, here's the recording so they can see it or share it or burn it as they choose?
Yes, everyone here who registered to join will get an email with the recording as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lisa, for hosting and navigating me through some of the tech here. I'm still figuring out Zoom, but it's amazing technology. We don't have to get together. Is that good or bad or both?
Probably a mix, like many things. And I just wanted to, as we were closing, let everyone know that years ago I was visiting Tom Regan, and he was an animal rights philosopher who wrote a book called Empty the Cages and many other books. And we asked him what was the most pressing issue of our time. And he said it was this native, non-native species issue that was that scientists were talking about. And so I remembered that. And this talk today is all about that controversial concept. So thank you to Jack for presenting it to us so clearly, giving us something important to think about, and we'll see how it plays out.
And to anyone here, the books that aren't out of print that I recommend, there's of the bunch behind me, top left, Beyond the War and Invasive, or is that top right in here? It's maybe reversed. Beyond the War and Invasive Species is great. I think $18 paperback. The New Wild, Fred Pierce, environmental journalist, goes into a lot of these cases. I mean, they're all very readable. You can check them out on Amazon. I buy from Abe Books, used bookstore. But you can read reviews and get a taste for or ask me. Again, you can call me and I'll discuss which is best for you. And then Ken Thompson, Where Do Camels Belong? It's all the same stuff, but from a botanist point of view. So a little more botany. So there's any of those, just $20 or less, get one of these things. You don't have to read it cover to cover. It's not a big deal. You can just skim it and it's so eye-opening and comforting. Like, oh my God, I kind of knew that was crazy, but it's not. And this guy is speaking, these three authors, 2 men and 1 woman in the case I was just reading. It's really helpful if you're at all interested in this topic and all want to convince some of your friends that you're not nuts because you don't want to go out killing things. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for letting me go on about it. I could do 2.5 hours, as you can tell.
And Claudia said in a closing comment, when you have a chance, share something about introducing other animals to control pests in Australia. So that is
well, that's a giant
giant question.
That's a giant which animals and which would you introduce? I mean, yeah, I mean, that's theoretically possible, but there's also many examples of where it wasn't a good idea to bring in cane toads, or maybe it was. And I've read a lot on the topics. There's no one answer to it. Again, it's tricky because we need to speak in generalizations, or we'll do 1.5-hour presentations that were supposed to be an hour. Who would do such a thing? But you need to be specific when it's which animal in what region of what country, what is it doing? And what do we think we can do about it? But for me, it's kind of simple. Like Barbara Bogard was speaking there. We know each other from pesticide battles. No pesticides ever, anywhere, all of them gone. And a lot of these things, it's a gray area. That is black and white. They're toxic poisons that should not be put into the environment. I don't care what Monsanto says or Bayer says about how safe it is.
Yes, and Kache was mentioning about the music video would be great on social media. And I think we have put that one on the IDA social media.
I can, if you can keep us open 1 more minute, I can put a link to it. It's on YouTube. I can pull it up pretty quick. Give me just a moment, and then you can copy it. 5 more seconds. Mary Poppins.
Yes, and IDA, we did put together a blog with a video and then a social media. So it's been out there, but you're welcome to share it out.
Yes. I mean, it's a little long it's good on YouTube. So I just put the link into I hope that's the latest version, September 15th. Oh, and I'm doing another song, folks, which I'm so excited about that IDA will probably finance if they are not scared of me now, which is super callous, dead and bloody, brutal mass psychosis. Yeah, it's just, these things have to be sung, because, well, you're IDA, so I'll bore you for 1 more minute before I get off the stage with a hook. Every single animal dies suffering, atrocious. When you kill them long enough, you hardly even notice. Supercallous, dead and bloody, brutal massacrosis. Don't you want to hear that whole song sung by who's Mary Poppins? God, I'm tired.
Julie Andrews.
Julie Andrews. Yeah. Okay, I'm done, Lisa. Thank you. I
Oh,
promise.
well, thank you so much for giving us that little teaser, and thanks to everyone for staying with us for a while. We really appreciate you, and we hope you'll join us for another Fireside Chat. Next up, we'll probably have Doll Stanley to share Justice for Animals in November. But for now, we're signing off with Jack, and thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us, Jack. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Lisa. Thank you, and IDA, in Defense of Animals.
Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Good
Good night,
night.
everyone.
Mhm.
Thank